Okay. All right. Good morning, Mr. West, Dr. West.
Yep. Good morning.
Thank you for making time to speak with us today. I have a few questions from the students in Raymond. If we can just run through them.
Sure.
Jensen was wondering, how often do you find new stars?
That's a good question, Jensen. Astronomers discover new things every day, right? And sometimes those are new stars, sometimes those are new galaxies, sometimes those are new planets. So every day, that's what for me makes astronomy exciting, is you discover new things every single day.
That's true. Awesome. Thank you. Sage was wondering, where are radio waves concentrated in space?
That's a good question, Sage. I would say a lot of the radio waves that we detect come from the center of our galaxy, for example, and a lot of other radio waves come from certain kinds of stars and even from black holes and things like that. So they come from a lot of really interesting different kinds of objects. But most of them are all throughout space. There's black holes everywhere in space, there's galaxies everywhere in space, but some are concentrated in the center of our galaxy too.
Okay, thank you. Taya was wondering, can you detect living things in space using radio waves?
Good question, Taya. In principle, sure. I mean, if, like us, we use radio waves to listen to music, right? When you listen to your stereo at home, for example, or in your car, you're listening to radio waves. And we broadcast radio waves into space, sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident. So any aliens out there, maybe they're listening to your favorite radio station right now. And so likewise, maybe we can detect radio signals from other planets someday as well.
Awesome. That's a good point. I'd never thought of it that way.
No.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Tyler and Reese were wondering how far you can see with a telescope.
Good question. Tyler and Reese, I think the furthest we can see into space, we can see billions of light years into space. And what that means is that you can see light that's traveled for billions of years to arrive here at Earth. And that's true whether it's a radio telescope or a telescope that collects the light that you and I can see with our eyes. All different kinds of telescopes can see essentially to the same distance, and that we can see objects that are billions of light years away.
Okay. And then with that, I've been wondering, does it get better every year? Like,
Can you see further?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in principle, sure. There's a limit to how far we can see, because when the Big Bang, we think the universe began with a Big Bang, this giant explosion, and the universe was really hot initially. And when we look back into space, at some point we kind of see the fireball that's left over. We can't see past that, in a sense.
Okay.
So there's a limit to how far back we could ever really hope to see.
Okay.
But it's not like, suddenly a new galaxy appears in the sky that we haven't seen before, that sort of thing.
Right. Okay.
And even if they did, those are the faintest and the furthest away ones. They're really hard to see.
Right. So do you think we're kind of approaching the limit of how far we can see, or?
No, I mean, in principle, there's still a lot of the universe out there that there's a lot of nearby things that we can't see because they're really faint, for example. So I'm not sure that we've reached a limit yet. We certainly can see this fireball that's left over from the Big Bang, but there's a lot of stuff between now and then, basically, that we can still explore.
Right. It's interesting to think of it in terms of time.
Yeah,
Between now and
definitely.
then.
Yeah, well, that's what it is, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the beauty of astronomy. The further you look into space, the further you look back in time. So when you look at the moon, you see the moon as it looked 1 second ago, because that's how long it takes the light to reflect off the moon and reach the Earth.
Yeah.
When you see the sun, you see it as it looked 8 minutes ago. And when you see stars and planets and other galaxies, you're looking back millions and billions of years into the past.
Yeah. That gives me goosebumps. It's just awesome to think. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
You got off track.
Sure.
Okay, James was wondering, when people listen to radio waves from space, why do they pulse and hiss? Why do they make the sounds that they do?
That's a good question, James. It's true when you listen to like NASA recordings of radio waves from Jupiter, for example, or other things. And that's partly because, when you listen to music on your radio, that's radio waves, obviously, but it's got a certain kind of pattern, a certain kind of melody or something. And the radio sounds that we collect from space, or the radio waves, I should say, they're not really sounds, are more chaotic than that. And when we convert it into sound, it just sounds like hiss or static or something like that because there's no melody, there's no music to it. It's just sort of random radio noise, essentially.
Okay. We were listening, we found audio clips of pulsars.
Yeah, that's
in
different.
wireless,
Yeah,
right? And so
because then it's a
was-
regular pulse. That's right, hence the
Yeah.
name. So
Yeah.
so that's pretty cool.
That was very cool.
There's a couple. In fact, there was a guy in Canada. Sorry, going off topic.
Mhm.
They discovered these planets around a star, and they have these like harmonic motions, and they actually converted it into music.
Oh, wow.
I forget the guy's name. He's at the University of Toronto. It was like just in the last year.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. It's worth checking out.
Yeah, we'll have to find that.
So you can listen to the planets orbiting the other star, essentially. I mean, it's creative work to turn it into sound, but it's cool.
Yeah, it's still, you're using
Yeah.
interstellar sound.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, thanks. Carissa was wondering, do you think there's another Earth out there?
Great question, Carissa. There's a lot of planets we found so far, right? There's thousands of planets that are known already, and we've only looked at a small piece of space. So there must be billions of trillions of planets out there. So whether there'd be one identical to Earth, hard to say, but I bet there's some that are really similar, right? And if they'd have people or cats and dogs and horses, who knows? But I think that there's probably very similar Earth-like planets out there, sure.
Yeah, awesome. Ben is wondering if it's possible to build a telescope that collects microwaves and what that would tell us about the universe.
That's an excellent question. That's a future astronomer right there. Sure, there are actually microwave telescopes that are built, and sometimes they're similar to radio waves, and it gives us information about things like where stars are being born today, or about black holes, or actually about the fiery Big Bang, the birth of the universe. So there are microwave telescopes out there already. Astronomers try and collect every kind of light that we can. Light comes in many different types, from radio waves to visible to infrared to ultraviolet that gives you a sunburn to X-rays when you go to the dentist or the doctor. Those are all different kinds of light, and we try and collect them with different kinds of telescopes because they all give us different information about the universe.
Awesome. Thank you. Kurt is wondering if anyone is trying to build a bigger refracting telescope.
Refracting telescope, great question, Kurt. Not today, because the problem with the refracting telescope uses a glass lens to collect light, and glass is really heavy, and it sags, and then it's like if you had a lens that's kind of distorted or doesn't focus light properly. So it's much cheaper to build reflecting telescopes that use a mirror, because you can support them from underneath, for one thing, and you can make the glass much thinner these days. So generally, the biggest telescopes that are being built now are all reflecting telescopes with mirrors, not refracting telescopes.
And with that, just a question that I've been wondering, is there a difference in image quality between refracting and reflecting?
Well, I mean, it depends, right? In principle, they're both focusing light rays, but like with lenses, for example, you have to make corrections. You get something that's called like chromatic aberration. All the different wavelengths of light, the different colors, don't get bent the same way by the glass.
Okay.
So you get this kind of rainbow effect around images, and you can correct for it and everything. But in general, the sharpness of the image, how much detail you can see, shouldn't really matter.
It doesn't matter.
I mean, the thing that really matters again is how much detail you can see depends on how big the lens or the mirror is. And because you can make a mirror much bigger, that allows you to see more detail than you could with a lens. But if you had an identical size lens and an identical size mirror, it shouldn't really make a difference. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.